This is Joyful, Happiness Movement and Podcast. I discover the science behind happiness and well-being, and through sharing stories, I am searching for the secrets to a happier life. You can find two types of episodes on our platforms, guest series and solo episodes. In our guest series, I will be meeting with experts who share their knowledge or experiences, contributing to a better understanding of a happier life. The solo episodes are divided into series of 5 episodes in each series, as in each episode I will talk about a topic related to one of the 5 pillars of happiness that we've designed at Joyful. If you're curious to know what are those 5 pillars, I invite you to check out our Instagram page. I hope you're ready, as it's time to be joyful. In today's episode of the Joyful Podcast, I am thrilled to welcome Dr Shékina Rochat. Dr. Rochat holds a PhD in psychology with a specialized focus on career counselling. As both a practitioner and a researcher, her mission is to support professionals in navigating their careers with confidence and purpose. This commitment has been recognized with numerous awards in her field. Dr. Rochat is also the author of several influential books on career development and psychology, including one especially interesting in my regard, as it combines her expertise in psychology with her passion for climbing. Alongside her professional accomplishments, she is a dedicated mother and an incredibly warm and insightful individual. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you will too. Hello, Shékina. Thank you for joining me today here at the Joyful Podcast. I'm really also happy that we get to meet face-to-face, as before I was recording online most of the episodes. So I'm really happy that we have this opportunity to meet here in Lausanne. First, tell me, what aspects of rock climbing might be useful while navigating our career?
I would say that in rock climbing, as well as in real life, for example, navigating one's career, the common denominator is that we always encounter obstacles. But the difference is that when we encounter obstacles in real life, we have a tendency to think, why is this happening to me? How can I avoid this difficulty? And, this is a stop to all my career project, for example. While when we are climbing, we are really seeing obstacles as opportunity to grow. We are looking for obstacles. We think that they will help us develop our skills, our creativity, our intelligence. So what I really like about climbing is the spirit you have. And I think that if you can translate it into navigating your career, it can really change everything.
Mm-hmm. Is this what you're talking about in your book about climbing and career?
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell me, if you weren't a career counselor and a researcher in this domain, what do you think your profession would be?
I've always dreamed of being a secret agent.
Okay.
Please don't tell anybody. But it's more of a fantasy, and I know I do not have the required skills to do so. But still, it might be something, it's about leading investigation and also trying to have an impact on the world. So maybe it's a two core thing that I like.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're talking about the fantasy of like having a job versus actually doing this job. I think that these are the two things that we sometimes may mix. So we think that we would really like doing one job, but in reality, if we're in the situation, perhaps it's not really for us, right?
Yes, exactly.
And could you tell me, how did you get interested in career counseling?
Yes, to be honest, it wasn't really planned. When I started my bachelor degree in psychology here in Lausanne, the first thing I was sure was that I didn't want it to do career counseling. I wasn't sure about the rest, but this I knew. And at the end of my bachelor degree, I went to a session about which presented the master program, and I wasn't listening, to be honest. But then I heard 3 words, which were problem solving, focused on short-term intervention, and a person-centered approach. And I was like, oh, what is that? I want to do that for my master. And it was career counseling. So since then, I really fallen in love with this discipline of psychology.
Mm-hmm. And do you do more practical work with clients, or do you do more research?
Yeah, I've done both. Now I'm mostly in research, but after my getting my degree, I went into practice, and then I went back to make a PhD thesis. And after my thesis, I went back to practice, and then I got a postdoc, so I went back to research, and now I'm here at the university for a few more months, and then I think I will go back to practice.
Yeah, which one do you enjoy more?
I think I really need both, and for me, research without practice is really sterile, and practice without research is not stimulating enough. I think for me, it's really a mix of both.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm happy that you will share your experiences in today's conversation. Career seems to play a central role in our lives, as we spend the vast majority of our time during the week at work.
Yeah.
But then, well, depending on where we come from, we may have a different approach towards work. So some may think that career defines us, and others may think that it is solely a way to earn money. Do you think that there is a better approach towards career?
I think there are huge cultural differences in the way of approaching the centrality of career. In Western society, where we are much more individualist, career is often seen as a huge way to express ourselves and to experience well-being and meaning. But in other cultures, for example, in Africa, sometimes it's work is more a part of your day. But the most important thing are being with the family, being with the community. So I think it's really about the life sphere that you have, in which you invest your time and your energy, and this depends on a lot of factors too.
So would you say that the approach we have in our individualist culture may be perhaps sometimes harmful for us, because we are so focused on the career, which is often related to pressure and everything, and then maybe we forget that there are some other things that are so important?
Yes, definitely. As we say, we shouldn't put all our eggs in the same baskets, and this is really that about a career.
Yeah, and I think that as you mentioned, the cultural differences are really apparent, because even in Europe, I think if we compare some countries, then we can see some differences between them.
Yeah.
Like I've worked, for instance, in France, and I come from Poland, and I could even see a difference there, that it is true that in France you have a completely different approach towards work, and I think that they are way less focused on this, pressure related to being in the workplace. Where in Poland we are kind of hardworking, and in France, we have long lunch breaks and a lot of holidays, and the work is not really that important. So I think even within the same kind of culture, we still have some kind of differences, right?
Yeah, yes, of course, definitely. And even among the same society, among the same culture, we can have huge difference. For example, if you come from the privileged part of the society or not, it really depends. For example, in many culture, the place of leisure is expanding in one's life, because family and work are less stable. So maybe the most stable life sphere in your maybe the more stable sphere in your life would be your leisure activities, and so it's a better bet to invest in that sphere rather than in family or work.
Yeah. And so kind of related to that, I think, so you're talking about the stability of work. So I think that, once upon a time, it was like you chose a career, and very often you would commit to this career for your whole life. So you were an accountant or a teacher, or you were working for one firm your whole life, and you were satisfied. You could earn a lot to be happy, and the work fulfilled you. Whereas today, well, it's estimated that we will probably change our jobs multiple times. Is this something we should be afraid of? Is it something we should worry about? What do you think?
Yeah, I think two things. First, this past stability that we kind of imagine is usually not that much in reality, because people used to change job, and for example, people had to change their job with the technological change that happened, but for a very long time ago. So people already had to change, but it's true that now it's kind of being the norm that we will change, and we know it. And if should we be afraid of that? I cannot enter in the term. Fear is about a concrete object that we know of. Here we are more about anxiety, because we don't know what will happen, and this uncertainty may provoke anxiety, but we don't know if we have reason to. So yeah, I don't know if it's clear enough.
Yeah. So do you think that perhaps instead of looking at it as something we worry about and something will generate anxiety, we could perhaps also look at it as opportunity to find something else that perhaps would interest us?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for rephrasing that in a much more elaborated way. But yes, it's some research shows that excitement and anxiety feel the same in the body. You have your heart is pounding, and maybe your breath is accelerating. So it's the same, but at some point it's your brain who decides if it's anxiety or if it's excitement for something. And the world of work has really changed, and we don't know what would be the next change. But at some point, the change were great too. We have much more flexibility, and the labor market is more open to women too. So there have been positive change, and also we don't know what will be the change next. Still, there are opportunity in the midst of uncertainty.
Yeah. So you said that in our approach to work, there is the role of culture. Then there is the role of perhaps the current situation on the workplace, right? Mm-hmm. So whether, like the times in which we live. So either everything changes very fast, or maybe it's a bit more stable. And then in relation to that, we have to perhaps notice that there is also a lot of there's this whole space of digital media and social media in particular, where you have a lot of cases of influencers or other people who earn money by creating digital content. Do you think that this somehow impacts also our approach to work?
I would say it's definitely impact our approach to work, especially among young people. I think if you ask you ask young people what they would like to do as a dream job, most of them will answer influencer. Mm-hmm. So it definitely has an impact. You also have a lot of advice about your career that are provided by influencer. So yeah, it definitely has an impact.
Do you think it's positive or negative?
I would say it's like everything. It's always how you perceive it and what you do about it. And I think people who are thinking about what they can create and what they can become an expert in order to share their knowledge and their skills to the world, it's a really great mindset. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it can be also that you become self-focused and just preoccupied with the number of likes you get. And so this can be negative and has a negative effect, even on your health and mental health. So.
Yeah, but maybe it doesn't depend so much on whether it's social media or not. It's also in other kinds of jobs, right? It depends on the approach that you have.
Yeah, exactly, and what to do about it.
Okay, so, and do you think that it's possible today to do one job our whole lives, or?
I would say that, for example, people who are a professor at the university, they have a huge stability. But in order to get there, they had to make to have some changes. So I think most people have or will undergo to such changes. I think, yeah.
So how can we choose the right career? This is, I think, the main question of our today's podcast and the main question of your entire research career, probably, and practical career. So, for instance, as children, we may have different fantasies. So, who do I want to be when I grow up? And then there are a lot of different factors which come into play. So, how much money will I earn? Or is it something which is respected, maybe, or not respected, and so on? How to choose? Which factors should we take into consideration?
Yeah. A lot of factors will influence your decision process. Just a number of opportunities that are available or that are available to you, your personal characteristics, your value, your personality, your interests, your abilities, all that will have an impact, have an influence on you, among other factors that, as you mentioned, global factors, for example. But really what's interesting about the term fantasy you mentioned is that a career transition, this moment where we have to think about a decision and try to make a decision, are like the perfect time to let this fantasy emerge and trying to imagine ourselves doing a lot of different positions. But this is only part of the process where you are in your head, and it's a very abstract process. What's really important is then to go and try out these possibilities. And for example, you imagine that you can be a secret agent. Okay, so maybe see how you look by doing maybe, I don't know, some internship with the police or something like that. And when you're trying out, when you're making this concrete experience, you will have a lot of feedback, both feedback from the other. Do they think that you do well here? But also you will have emotional feedback about how you feel in that role. And these are really important. But needs some reflection about yourself and about what is existing. But the other part is really to bring that to the concrete and trying to have experience that will help you really choose something that is a good fit, I will say.
Yeah. But so how to do it? I mean, because we have to decide, for example, our university career path, we have to choose something, career we want to follow.
Yeah.
So we are often like 18 or 19 or 17 years old. So I think that we rarely get the chance to try out everything that perhaps would interest us.
Yeah.
So what do we do about that?
So for example, if you're hesitating between medicine and psychology, for example, the first step will be to try to follow some classes if that's possible, and to see how you feel about that, how you mingle with other person, and then maybe to speak with the student in order to learn about their experience and try to see how it matches yours. But also to contact people who are already, for example, psychologists or doctor, physician, and then try to have more information about their daily life, even maybe shadowing them for a week or something like that, in order to really have this concrete information you need to make a decision.
And what about these pragmatic aspects? So should we think about things such as money or status while choosing a career, especially for instance at this young age when you're 18 years old, or do you think that this is something really irrelevant?
I would say it depends on the career track you're on or a training track you're on. For example, if you are about to start university, in Switzerland, at least, university, you have bachelor, master, and then you go in the work, you start an occupation, and then you have to find a position. And when you are choosing your bachelor degree, what's most important is to focus on what you already have information about yourself. That is what you're good at and what you like to do. Then once you're in a batch, and for that maybe you can read the curriculum of the class to make sure that it really is something that you like and you feel you're capable of. When you're selecting your master, it's better to focus on the specific interests and capabilities you've explored during the bachelor. For example, if you're doing a bachelor in law, maybe you really liked family law or civil law, and then you will do a master that's specialized in that. And then you will choose a career, and here your personality will become important. For example, if you're a very extroverted person, maybe you will prefer to become a lawyer. But if you're maybe more a reserved person, you will prefer to work as a notaria, I don't know.
Notaria, I think.
Yeah, okay. And then you will have to look for a position. And here is your values that will hold the most important. When you're choosing a position, this is where money can come into mind. This is where the security, for example, or the prestige, or helping others. And sometimes people feel like they're trapped in their job and they want to change everything. But what really they need is to change the context in which they work in order to make it more aligned with their value. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. I think it comes down also to this question about the stability in the end, right? Because I know a lot of young people who struggle to make this decision at this early stage of choosing perhaps a university career. Because, for instance, either they choose something which is quite stable, so they would go to law school or to medical school, or they have like this passion, so they like really love photography. But living as a photographer is a very complicated thing, and it's something that, well, you would have to risk probably a lot, and you're not sure how would you end up. And I don't know how much of it is true, because then in the end, I think maybe it's not that complicated. Like you finish photography studies, and then like you find some kind of a job, and it's not really that's unstable as you would think. But there is this kind of reflection that I think many young people have when they are making this decision.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
I would say that's something that's very different, for example, between a photographer and a medical student, is that it's the way other people have questioned their choice. If you have good grades and no difficulty at school, and you say you want to become a physician, for example, everybody will say, oh, yes, great, go in that direction. So you will follow, and it can be great. But we also have a lot of medical students who finish their studies, they start to practice as physicians, and they're like, oh, but I don't like this, because they never explored anything. While a photographer, probably if your child tell you, I want to become a photographer, you will say, maybe think twice, and then you will please take the time, explore other things. So usually some people who decide to become a photographer, they are much more aware of what it means. Yeah, exactly. So this is, usually when they engage in that kind of position, they don't expect it to have stability, but they know they will like it. So it's kind of different. But what's the most important, I think, in a modern career is not to think of either or, because you can be a physician and a photographer at the same time. So we have, for example, here in the SNF Foundation, you have a contest, photograph contest for scientific, and you can win award for your picture, for example. So it's really about how you can manage to have an equilibrium that suits you.
And for me, I think what also helped me was because I was in a biological medical high school. So there was a lot of pressure for students to go to medical school afterwards. So like on the first year of high school, perhaps I thought about doing that. But then I just imagined that I would go each day to the hospital, and I would spend hours and hours in hospitals, working with sick patients, and also being in contact with people who are suffering a lot.
And I realized that I don't think that this is something I want to do.
Yeah.
So I think that it's also, just like to think about whether you can really be in this context.
Yeah.
And so what you said basically about perhaps trying it out and being in the situation, does it really suit you, your interests or your character and personality?
Yeah, definitely.
So for instance, when you work as a career counselor, what are the steps that you go through with your clients or people you work with?
Mm-hmm.
Do you ask them to do personality tests? Do you talk to them? What does your work consist of?
Yeah. Usually people imagine that career counseling is just about taking steps and maybe having a few interviews. And recently I really tried to how do we say that, to decompose the steps we are going through. So I don't know if you want to say, but usually first we have to welcome the person and just be there to be to make the person feel at ease. And then we will listen to their demands, what they expect from the career counseling process. And then we will have to consider what is the demand of other person, because most of the time in career counseling you have other person that have interest in the process. May it be parents, may it be a partner, may it be a school institution, for example. So we have to try to find a way to acknowledge all of that and to find a way to assess that. Then usually we try to analyze the problems the person is facing, and to do that we inquire about the current situation, but also the past situation. When we are working with adults, they already have a lot of, they have already done a lot of stuff. And then we are trying to investigate what they hope for, what would be the best possible outcome for them. And then we spend time analyzing the problems they encounter to make that possible come true. That's an ideal situation. And once we have a better view of the problem, it could be, for example, chronic indecisiveness or a dysfunctional belief, thinking that we will have the same career for one life. So the choice is really important and it's very anxiety-provoking, for example. Once we have this picture of what are the problems, we will try to negotiate with the person. What will we do together? How we will take this problem and how we will try to solve them. Once we've done that, usually we have 3 steps that really differentiate career counseling from all kinds of counseling, which are to try to foster introspection, so helping the person think about their interests, personality, abilities, and value, for example. And then we have this exploration step where we try to make them be aware of the opportunities and really gathering information in order to make a choice, which is the last step. And then most of the time we don't just say, okay, you made a choice, that's great, but we try to make sure that the choice is feasible. So we accompany them in the process of planning how they will reach their goal, and also how to help them take action, because many people do a lot of planning but never take action. And then we end the process. We say goodbye and do not hesitate to come back if things change, because we know that it can be a recursive process.
Yeah, interesting. Really cool. Because I remember that when I was in high school, or maybe even in secondary school, sometimes there would be a psychologist who comes to the class and he gave us some tests to fill out about personality or something. And then you had a result which said that basically you can do this kind of professions. But I thought that this is really, it wasn't really a good indicator. Like, what will you really do with this? And thought that this is kind of schematic. So, but the process that you're describing, it seems really, really great, I think, as an accompaniment to people who have problems with deciding upon their careers or then reorienting themselves. Perhaps before we move on to talking about reorientation and then changing our career, I would still like to ask about a little more about choosing the right one in the first place. There's this big question which we already kind of talked about, but whether our career should be our passion. What do you think?
I would say, for me, having a passion is a great thing. We have a lot of studies showing that having a patient that is truly chosen is good for well-being, for meaning in life, and so on. So it can be a very precious things you want to pursue. The problem is that there is two problems. The first one is that passion also comes with a lot of difficulties, and living a passionate life, it also suffering a lot just by the etymology of the word patient, which means suffering. So there is both. So this is one thing. The other one is that usually people have the expectation of finding their patient, but we do not find patient. We excavated them. We really have to smell the trace and follow it, smell the trail and follow it. And it's really about asking yourself, what is bringing me pleasure, what provokes me positive emotion, and then trying to go deeper in that kind of activities, and maybe realizing, oh no, this is not what I thought, and trying other things. But it's really about something that you will have to go deeper, and not just something that you will just found, for example, by passing an interest test that will tell you this is your patient. So no, it's really something that the more you do, the more you will feel the interest, the curiosity, and this is how passion grow.
Yeah. I don't know if you are, because I recently listened to this podcast with a man named Jon Jachimovich. I don't know if you know his work, but he's working on passion.
Yeah.
And so he said something that I kind of liked, which was that we very often think about passion. For instance, I am passionate about playing the piano, and then I stopped playing the piano, so I'm no longer passionate about that. And he actually said that we have kind of a wrong idea about passion, because he thinks that passion is actually like, what do you care about? So it's more about like the action when we are doing something. And so, for instance, if you're playing the piano, you enjoy it for some reason. So like, you should really think about why is it that you care about that so much, and what is it that you care about, and this is what would make you passionate. So if you play the piano, perhaps you play it because it gives you the opportunity to be creative. Perhaps you can be alone with your thoughts, or perhaps there's anything else there involved. And then like you can also use the same kind of skills or things that accompany you in some other activity.
Mm-hmm.
And so that basically the fact that we think about passion in these very strict categories, perhaps is something which harms us in the end, because we think, oh, I don't have any passion, or I hate my job because I'm not passionate about it, and I don't really love it every day when I'm going there. Yeah, what do you think about
Yeah, I mean, completely agree with this author, and it's really something, people are waiting to be passionate by the job, but no, it really needs to understand what makes you passionate about it, and when you have a clearer understanding of that, you can find other way, and you can, and this is something great, you can almost become passionate about everything if you approach it that way, so that's great.
Yeah.
Just a quick break. If you would like to engage in a small act of kindness yourself, go and follow us on Instagram. It will help us grow and develop this initiative. You can find us under the name Joyful. That's spelled with 10 U's. And if you're feeling particularly generous today, consider rating our podcast on the platform you're using to listen to us. It only takes a few seconds of your time, but it will bring a huge smile to our faces. Enjoy the rest of the show.
So then let's imagine that I've already found a job, or someone who's listening to us, he's already found his dream job.
Yeah.
And then it turns out, and he thought that he would be passionate about it. Yeah. But then as time passes by, it turns out that it's not as great as I thought.
Mm-hmm.
So what's to do? What may be the reasons for that, and what should I do in this situation?
Yeah. It's true that when you look at the characteristic of a job that is fulfilling, usually what you can understand from the different components that are associated with a fulfilling job, such as, for example, being engaged, or having job satisfaction, or feeling positive emotion at work. What you understand is that it's about motivation. It's about being motivated for your job. And when you see that thing like that, it's easier to understand where does it come from that we lose motivation for one job. And a model of motivation I really like, say that in order to be motivated, we need to have a goal. That goal should be clear, important to us, and also hold priority over other goals. And then we need to believe that we can reach that goal because we believe we have the personal requirements to do so, but also that because we believe that our context supports us in this pursuit. And then we have to feel emotion that will give us the energy to work towards that goal. So when we start a new job, usually it's like, wow, this is a goal we were pursuing so hard, and maybe we are so engaged in learning new things that we feel like we are really at our best level of, at the optimal level of stimulation in terms of capability belief, for example, and we may have a lot of positive emotion. But after a certain time, maybe we realize that once we reach that goal, we have less goal clarity. So what comes next, and we don't know, or we get used to do things, so we become much more skilled. So the task is not at our skill level, and also with adaptation, emotional adaptation or emotional treadmill, we can also start to feel less positive emotion or in a less acute way than what we had at the beginning. So we can really ask ourselves, okay, I'm lacking motivation for work. Where is the problem? Because one problem in every of this dimension can lead to feeling bored.
Mm-hmm. So what is the emotional treadmill that you've mentioned?
It's not habituation. En français, c'est le principe d'habituation. It's hedonic treadmill. Sorry, hedonic adaptation or hedonic treadmill. Yeah.
Okay, so in general, that we get that like motivation is a complex kind of state phenomenon, something that we need in order to fulfill the job, but after some time we may lack one of the components that you just described, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so we do not really feel good at work anymore.
Yeah.
And so what to do in that?
For me, it's really important to have this model of these three main components in order to understand where is the lack of motivation coming from. And once you know that, then you can act. For example, if you perceive that the work is not more aligned with your value, you can it has something with the goal you are pursuing, and that they are not aligned with what you are doing. Then you will either try to make your value much more helpful in your work, or you will try to find or recognize, or you will try to find a place where you will have a better match with your value. If you see that the lack of motivation is coming because, for example, you're becoming too good at your job, or you master that, and now you don't have this flow state you had in the first time, then you will try to maybe ask for more responsibilities, or you will try to do things different ways in order to keep finding this stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's about emotion, you may wonder to ask, is that because you feel too many negative emotion? For example, you're too anxious. The word really is too anxiety provoking for you, or is that because you lack positive emotion? And then you can try, okay, maybe I will try to make sure that I'm living positive emotion in my work. How can I do that? This is a possibility. Or maybe try to find another context in which you can do it, or try to do other activities.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's
No, I think it's great. So in relation to that, we very often about this losing of motivation.
Yeah.
We very often talk about burnout.
Yeah.
Where does burnout come from? Does it also come from this either one of the three components that you've mentioned?
Here in the motivational process, I focused on the, I would say, on the internal process, but these are supported by biological factors. So also, if you're sick, for example, it's difficult to be motivated, or you can be motivated if you're sick, but you will not successfully manage your goal.
Mm-hmm.
And burnout is also really linked to external factor, how the job is arranged, what are the relationship in in the workplace. So I think really burnout is at as a junction between internal factor and external factor, and
And so, how can I notice when something is wrong, or when I like the moment where I start to lose motivation, lack motivation, or start to feel something which seems like a burnout?
Yeah, I think really the model I told you about, the model of motivation, is the model of Martin Ford. I don't think I mentioned that. But this model says that motivation is one part of performance or performance at a job or in life. The thing about being able to reach one's goal. So motivation is the part. The other part is with skills. We need not only to be motivated, but also to have the skills required to do the task. And this depends on biological factors such as health, sleep, how you eat. And all this is in a context which can be a natural context with the weather or, working in the place which has tree or that kind of thing. It's also social context, socio-institutional context, and material context. So really, you can use this model as a map in order to understand where does the problem come from. Is it a motivational problem? Is it a problem with skills? Sometimes we don't have the skills to do something and we are like losing a lot of energy trying to do it anyway. Sometimes it's also a physical problem. And once we have dismissed all this possibility, then we have to look also at the external problem. Maybe there is something wrong with the environment. And is that at the social level, the socio-institutional level, material? For example, you don't have the good, software to make your job, and it's really complicating things. So it's really about identifying, and most of the time it's multiple things, but
So when should I make the decision to reorient myself?
To change career. I will say that changing career sometimes is the only possibility, and for some people it's really what was the best decision in their life was changing career. But changing career demands a lot of resources in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of place in the society, all these kind of things that will change with your career. And sometimes it's not possible. So the first thing I would say, the first step prior to change career is try to do what we call job crafting, which is slightly changing the task you have to do in order to make it more aligned with your passion, with your interest, with your ability, with your value, and trying to change things like that, not necessarily changing your job in itself, but really trying to change either the way you perceive the task you have to do or the tasks themselves. And job crafting is really receiving a lot of interest in the literature now because it's really something promising. It's also very empowering to realize we have a say in what we have to do and how we do it.
And it's easier to employ, right, than to just...
Exactly, yeah. But sometimes you will realize it's not enough. You may have to maybe you have changed everything you could in the way you were doing, and then maybe you will have to change position first and see, is that the same thing in another company or in another context? And if that doesn't work, then I will suggest changing career.
Okay.
But this is when we speak about voluntary career change. And most of the time, career change are not voluntary. It's because either you get you lose your job, or you get sick, or you get other problem. You follow your partner somewhere else in the world. So it really changed the process of how you do things.
So if I would like us to perhaps look at some examples. Could you perhaps tell me then about an example of a person who who decided to change his career and who succeeded and who's now happier than ever because of this new life path.
Yeah. This is the kind of success story we like to hear about. But I once met in a completely other. I once met a guy who was a career coach, not a career counselor, but a career coach, and we had to collaborate on a project together. And then he told me his life story, and he told me that at first he was in finance, and he was doing very well. He was very productive. He earned a lot of money. He quickly got a lot of responsibilities. And at some point, he had a burnout, and he realized that things were going too fast for him, that he doesn't like the way that technology was replacing face-to-face interaction and this kind of thing, and that he was really losing meaning in his job. And he got laid off after his burnout, which was in the spirit of the company he was working for. And when he was unemployed, he participated in how do we say that, in workshop for unemployed people, where he found himself in position to coach young people to do their resume and their motivation letter, and kind of used everything he has learned in his past life to help them know the rope of finding position. And he really said, okay, this is what I like. This is what I liked in finance. It was about giving advice and using his knowledge to help people. And he realized that he really wanted to do that as a career. And he got trained, and he got his career coach certificate. And now he's a career coach, and he's really happy about that. And he tells this story to everybody.
Cool. Yeah, but I think it must be difficult. Well, if you have a burnout, then of course, like, you will just doing what you're doing and perhaps start with something else. But then I can imagine that very often you may be unhappy at your current work, but it's complicated to change it just because you feel that perhaps you might like something else better because you have a lot of financial responsibilities and maybe family or something that, it's not that easy to just change it because you feel like trying something new, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we often heard story about people in finance who change everything, but also this is the people who have probably the most resources, financial resources to do so. And
definitely. What about cases where, for instance, we have younger people, so people who perhaps just finished their studies. So let's imagine someone finishes 5 years of studies, and then he or she realizes that, in fact, they don't really like the thing that they studied. Then what to do in this case? Would you say that it's better to try to work in the field in which you're qualified, or to reorient yourself from the start, since now you know that there's something else that interests you?
Yeah. It's difficult. And I also have an example. And for example, I told you many medical students end their studies and they start working, and they work like 1 year, 2 years, and they're like, but I really don't like to. And many times people try different possibilities. They say, okay, I don't like working in a hospital, so I will try to have my own cabinet, or I will work as a pediatrician, for example. And they realize it's not working either. So they say, okay, but I think I really need to change.
So now I will be a photographer.
Yeah, exactly. It's true that it's sometimes exactly. Yeah.
What about, do you think that sometimes younger people perhaps are afraid of trying themselves out in the professional environment? Because I know I have this feeling that after you finish your studies, it can be kind of terrifying that now you're supposed to use the skills that you're kind of sure that you don't have in a professional environment. And so I think that sometimes we would then try to look for other opportunities, because it's easier to start something from scratch, so start something new, than continue something that we've already started and then face perhaps failure or something, that it will be difficult because now we have to really take some responsibility and action. Do you think that's also happening?
I I would say that from my own experience, but it's not representative. Usually, people mostly tend to persist in the sense, and it's we call it the fallacy bias, sunk cost fallacy, which is the belief that now that you invested so many times and money and so on in a training, it's better to pursue than to change. And many people are more in this spirit rather than saying, okay, no, I don't want to pursue in that and I will try something else. So here with university students, mostly we have many people who change during the first year of their university. So they start 1 year in a discipline and then they change and then they start another year. So it's more about the beginning that it's easier to change that at the end. And usually people are kind of happy to start working and try what they have learned and so on. But it also depends on the kind of curriculum you've chosen and you've followed, because you have some curriculum that lead to a profession, for example, medicine, and others that just don't. If you do social sciences, you don't have a job at the end of university, and it's really different because you will have to find a way to make your skills useful to other people. So it's I also think that it's complicated in these domains. Like if you're a physiotherapist, then you're a physiotherapist. Or like you're a doctor, you're a doctor. If you're a teacher, I think it depends. Like you can then decide, I think, what kind of teacher do you want to be. But and then there are those professions where you really don't know what you're supposed to do after you finish your studies, and this is where it can get quite complicated. Yeah. Especially at the beginning, probably. So you have to try probably some things, right, and see what works best for you. Yeah.
And do you think that, we talked a little bit about that, but I didn't ask you that directly, do you think that our work should give us a sense of purpose and meaning? What do you think is the relationship here? Or maybe so do you think that, so should our job give us a sense of purpose and meaning? Or is it possible to have a sense of purpose and meaning without a job?
Yeah. As we already mentioned it, but it's really a very Western Western society idea that our job should have meaning, and it's a quite recent idea in the history of the world. If we go very back with the hunter-gatherer, what we know about how the relationship was to work with anthropological studies, for example, we know that part was just one activities among other, and not something we devoted a lot of hours per week, for example. And then with the agricultural revolution, work has become something which is really necessary for survival. And you had to plan and to devote a lot of effort to rely on solely 3 or 5 species of vegetable, for example. So this is when work became like something really difficult. And the word work in French comes from trépalium, which is something to torture other people. So it's really there. But in Europe, we had Martin Luther, the doctrine of Martin Luther, who says that it's a sacerdoce universel in French, which says that every job can be a way to serve God and then to have a higher purpose. And in every job you can have a higher purpose, and then your job can have a huge meaning in your life. This has really grew in the European way of envisioning work. And then we had the Industrial Revolution, where the power of steam became a way to replace the power of people or animals. And then people were starting to think, oh, maybe one day we will not have to work, so work should be for pleasure only. So we had kind of a hedonic hope for work that started to emerge since that time. And it's true, like, for example, in Switzerland, if you don't want to work, you can you can not working, and so you have to find meaning in the fact that you are working, or at least pleasure. So
so you would say that it's it is because for instance, recently I had this discussion with my boyfriend about whether jobs should be obligatory, because as you're saying, like sometimes it can be that you don't have to work because perhaps you will receive some the minimum salary from your country, because maybe you've worked already a lot in your life, so now you cannot work for 5 years or something. Maybe you have a wealthy family, so you don't really have to work, right? It also happens. And so then you're left with a lot of free time on your hands. Yeah. And so we discussed about that because, well, at first, so my boyfriend, he works as a physiotherapist, so he had a lot of patients like that who would not work and who would receive the minimal wage from France, because he was back in France. And he noticed that these people, they are not really happy because they spend the entire days at home, often just scrolling through their phones or watching TV, not really being active in any kind of way. So this also led to more health issues because they just were not being active and did not have anything to motivate themselves with. And then there was this other situation that I recently met a guy who's a private chef for a very wealthy family. And so for him, it's really funny because whenever he's arriving at home, the family is watching cartoons, like the adults are watching cartoons on TV. And so for him, it's kind of fun, like ironic, because he comes there to cook for them. And it's not like they have, very important things to do. And I don't know, maybe during the day they do, but it just illustrates like the general idea that, like he comes there, he cooks for them, and they're just like watching TV, at home because they really don't have to do anything. Yeah. So we had a discussion of whether having a job should be obligatory. So whether this is something that we should always do because this gives you the sense of meaning or not. So whether perhaps it is possible to find meaning outside of this professional environment. What do you think?
We can derive meaning from different sources. I really like Smith's model, which says that we can have meaning from 4 sources. The first one is a relationship with others. So counting for other people, but also being there for other people is a huge source of meaning. I think it's the most universal source of meaning. And also it's pursuing a goal that we feel matters and that go beyond us. And the third one is transcendence, which may be a vertical transcendence, for example, a relationship to a God, such as thinking that we are working for God, for example, but also horizontal, which is, for example, the relationship with nature that can give us meaning. And the first one is a story we tell to ourselves about who we are in the world and the place we have in. And it's true that work can give you all of that. We can have the opportunity to meet with people, to pursue a goal that is important, and to see it as a way to contribute to a higher power or to the nature, for example, and to have a nice story about ourselves. But this other source can also be found in other life spheres, such as, for example, family or leisure or working for the community and this kind of thing. So I think we can find meaning in other spheres of life, but it also should be make more science how we can find meaning in this other life. For example, pursuing a leisure where it's watching cartoons, for example, it's not a rewarding leisure. So people should have guidance also in order to select their leisure. And there are some authors who suggested that we should have, as we have a career counselor, we should have a leisure counselor as a way of...
but I think maybe it goes down to this more general guidance that perhaps we should have in using all the kind of media and leisure and everything that we have in our surroundings, because nowadays it's just so easy to choose always the easiest option and really work towards something, and then you don't really have the satisfaction you would have if you pursue a leisure in which, for instance, you can really develop your skills or interest and so on, right? And then when you're just watching TV, well, it can be nice, but it's only a 5 seconds high that you get from watching the TV show, and that's it, right?
Yeah. It's a difference between hedonic and eudaimonic well-being. So,
Oh yeah, I haven't heard that demonic well-being.
eudaimonic well-being.
No, I haven't heard.
No,
that.
okay.
What is
So it's about hedonic is a pursuit of pleasure, and eudaimonic is having a sense of purpose. And these two kinds of well-being are usually opposed. They can be complementary, but it's Ryan and Dechi, 2008, who wrote the distinction, which is true, very interesting, because most of the time when people say, "Oh, I want to be, for example, happy," they imagine feeling a lot of positive emotion. But what will really make them happy is pursuing an important goal to which they will develop their skills and so on. So there's a difference.
Okay, yeah. I wanted also to ask you, because this is something which is interesting for me. It's regarding the thing that we've already kind of discussed on not being prepared to work that we're supposed to do. I'm talking about the imposter syndrome, which I think is very common among people in all environments, but I think in academia it's especially prominent. Where does it come from and how to get rid of it?
Yeah. So the first thing is we tend to call it the imposter syndrome, and I did too. But I recently went to see in the American Psychologist Dictionary, and I noticed that we are not talking about imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome is about faking one's identity and lying compulsively. So we are more speaking about imposter phenomenon, which is about feeling like we don't own our own achievements and being successful, but not thinking that we are a fraud and that somebody will notice it. So something I found it very interesting to hear.
But maybe they should change it in a dictionary. At the end, everyone.
Now everyone in the book are published about imposter syndrome. So I was very shocked when I saw that. So this is why I tell you. So now But it's true that the academic context really triggered that. But it's mostly a thing that women encounter in academia, because it's also maybe I would say that differently. I'm not an expert in imposter syndrome, and it can come from a lot of different things. At first, we thought it was only something women experience, but then we realized men can also experience it. But it's really, I don't know really how to say that, because I found the difference between men and women really interesting. And in her book, Valerie Young, about the secret thought of successful women, she described basketball trainer and who trained men and then women. And a journalist asked him what's the difference between training men and training women. And he said, if I go in the locker room after a match and I say, "Oh, some of you are really not in shape, you should work out for the next game," I know that every woman will think that I'm speaking about themselves. While if I do that in a locker room full of men, everybody will say, "Hey, you should work out more," and not taking that for themselves. So I thought it was a really interesting way of seeing things, because maybe this tendency to take things personally, but I don't know if it's scientifically proved or anything, but I found it interesting.
So do you know how to work with our imposter syndrome, like what to do about it, how to get rid of it?
I think for me, the most useful as a woman in the academic, I definitely had that. But what was the most interesting thing for me was Valerie Young's suggestion to draw a scale with unperfect or failed or your bad, for example, and then on the other side the opposite, for example, perfect, extraordinary, good, and then to remember that between those two opposites, there are a lot of different scale. And she encouraged people to really draw this and then to say, okay, maybe what I did wasn't perfect, but is that a bad, or is that really...
Yeah, awful, like...
Yeah, awful. Yeah, exactly. Or the worst ever, exactly. And then you're like, okay, no, this is not the worst ever. Maybe it's 2 steps prior to being great or something like that. And I really think it helps you avoid this binary thought of I have to be perfect or I'm nothing. Or and this is, yeah.
Yes, I think it may be useful. And then I think also with time, perhaps it's getting better, right? Because I think that now you can look back and you look at all your achievements. So I guess that also this helps you somehow to then look at yourself maybe in a different light.
Yeah, maybe time and your own achievement, but also realizing that most of people struggle with that, and those who do not should. So it's true that sometimes yeah.
Okay, yeah, I understand. So what do you think about the 9-to-5 jobs? Do you think that 9-to-5 jobs and also jobs in front of our computers at our desks, do you think that they make us psychologically vulnerable?
For sure, a 9-to-5 to be in front of the desk or a screen make us at risk for our health, that is sure. And psychologically, it can too. I would say it really depends on the job. But in general, the problem is not really the 9-to-5, but it's about the stability. Too much stability is not good for people. We have to be a challenge. For example, if you lay in bed for 3 weeks, your muscles will start to regress and it's the same with all our skill. And if we stop caring about the uncertainty or how to adapt to changing circumstances, we kind of lost this ability. And when a change arrives, this is where we are the most at risk of suffering or at having difficulties making a necessary career change, for example.
Yeah. I heard a friend told me that currently in Australia, the most looked for man is the one that works as a handyman or as a plumber or I don't know, as a mechanic. So that's somehow this IT craze seems to be fading away. Mm-hmm. Do you think that we do in fact or will soon observe this shift in like going from this office job and computers and everything to more manual work? Do you think that this is what we will now be choosing more and more often?
I don't know, but I kind of hope. Also, we spoke a lot about meaning. Mm-hmm. In French, the word meaning is sense. It's the same as senses. And including the 5 senses is the same word. And I think that a word that has meaning is also the word where you can use your 5 senses. Mm-hmm. And when we are working behind the screen, we only use a sight and maybe a hearing, but also the other senses are kind of lost. And when you have more manual work, you may have more chance to have sense, I think.
It's more interesting, right? You get a lot of different sensory information and not, just text and calls and everything. Yeah, exactly. More interesting. But I think I do observe it among some of my friends, maybe also a bit older, who are like, I'm kind of tired of having this office job. Like, I really just want to garden or, I don't know, do something which is really manual and which will eventually bring you perhaps more sense into your daily life than going to the office and working for something that you don't really care about anymore, perhaps.
Yeah, and it's really also about going back to nature, and it's true that we can work in environments that are entirely artificial, and it can really bring us lots of meaning due to that, I think.
And what about, because now also when we are talking about people who work in front of computers, a lot of people now can work from home, and then also very often then they decide to do a workation, so they would go on holidays but also work at the same time. What's your view on that? I think it's a good idea.
It's a phenomenon we call blur out, and it usually go with burn out and brown out, which is the loss of meaning, or bore out, which is the dying of, exactly, at risk. And blur out is the lack of frontier between the two spheres, and it can be enriching because, for example, what you having a good time with your friend and family can give you energy to do your work, and having a fulfilling job can give you energy to be with your friend, for example. So it can be enriching, but it can also become a conflict. And I think this ultra connectedness can at some point also make us lose the protective aspect of barriers. So it's it can be very problematic.
So you have to just be cautious. Like having good happening, it can be nice, but then also you may like have the negative effects of that.
Yeah, exactly. And at least to be aware of what are the effects, and then choosing, okay, what do I accept and what do I don't, and how can I manage?
Yeah. Well, we're going to be heading towards the end of our conversation, but I have two final questions that I would like to ask you, and then I ask all of our guests. So question number one is, what is happiness to you?
Do you mean in a scientific way? To me personally, for me, I would say that when I feel at my best is when I feel like I have the chance to use my skills to help other people do the same. So I would say that this is where I feel at my best. So it's a more eudaimonic view of well-being, like having a sense of purpose.
And then, do you believe that one person can change the world? And if yes, then how? And if not, then why do you think it's not possible?
I would say I think we are all changing the world at every time because everything we do can make a difference. So, I would encourage people to do the best they can at every moment in order to, continue having a positive change.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having this conversation with me. It was also a pleasure talking to you today, and I learned a lot about how to choose a career, or how to change a career, and I hope that our listeners did as well. So in case anyone has a question or something, then do not hesitate to ask, I guess. And also I invite everyone to check out perhaps your books, which mostly are probably for the professionals, but I think that if someone's interested, then probably they can also find something for themselves, right? Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will see you back soon at Joyful. Cheers!